staying fairly soggy, and there'll be a few showers drifting into the west of Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland. A cooler feel here as well, with a brisk breeze. Elsewhere, temperatures around average, high teens, maybe up to 20 in the sunshine across Essex and Kent. As we go through this evening, we'll see a bit more of that showery rain drifting south through southern Scotland into northern England, North Wales, maybe even a shower or two over Lincolnshire and the Midlands for a time. But that all scoots away by dawn, and again, most of us will start Friday dry. Quite a mild night, double digits in many towns and cities. On to Friday, and quite a lot of clouds. Certainly initially, the sunshine fairly hazy over England and Wales, but generally a fine day here. Dry and bright too for Northern Ireland with some sunshine. Again, it'll be northwestern parts of Scotland that see the rain, spreading more widely across the Northern Isles through the day. Quite soggy across the Highlands, but through the central belt, southern Scotland, most places dry. And plenty of afternoon sunshine across England and Wales, and a warmer day as well. Temperatures could get up to 23 across the eastern parts of England. There will be a bit more of a breeze blowing during Friday, but still very pleasant conditions through Friday evening. Still a few scattered showers across the northwest, but for most places, high pressure is moving in during Friday, and that will bring most of us a fine day on Saturday as well, with some warm sunshine. There is the likelihood, though, of some thunderstorms coming up from the south on Saturday night and Sunday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The issues that need looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table. I'm not going to cancel anyone for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of the website Conservative Home. And here's what we've got coming up on the show. Finland could soon be the newest member of NATO following Boris Johnson's whistle-stop tour of Scandinavia to urge closer defensive ties. But it's something Putin has threatened against. Will Russia retaliate? And it's Cabinet Away Day as ministers gather in Stoke in a show of solidarity with the world outside of London. Does the government really get the cost of living crisis, or is this just a gimmick to distract us from hard times? And the downright weird, wonderful and woeful from the world's press. I'll round off the show with the Alex Agenda. That's what we've got coming up. You can email your thoughts to gbnews@gbviews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. First, though, it's time for GB News headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 2. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom.
The Met Police has issued more than 50 additional fines over parties held in Downing Street and other government buildings during lockdown. The Prime Minister's spokesperson confirmed none of the latest referrals have been issued to Boris Johnson. He, his wife Carrie, along with the Chancellor, were hit with fixed penalty notices last month. It brings the total number of fines to more than 100. Boris Johnson says a strong jobs-led recovery is the single most important thing the UK needs to focus on. The Prime Minister's chairing a cabinet meeting in Stoke-on-Trent today. He said the Queen's speech should enable legislative power to tackle underlying issues such as what's driving up cost of living prices, in particular energy.
Folks, we're going to get through this. It's going to take a lot of focus, but jobs, jobs, jobs is the answer. And that is how we will unite and level up across the whole of the country and get on with delivering on the mandate that the people gave us 2.5 years ago.
A spokesman for the Prime Minister said official talks between Britain and the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol will continue in the coming days. The Foreign Secretary has been holding crunch talks with the European Commission over the post-Brexit agreement today. Liz Truss is warning if the EU doesn't show the necessary flexibility over the Northern Ireland Protocol, the UK will have no choice but to act alone. Russia's foreign ministry is warning it'll be forced to take retaliatory military steps after Finland's leaders announced their intention to join NATO. After decades of neutrality, the Finnish Prime Minister and its president said the nation must apply for membership without delay. Sweden's also likely to follow suit. It's after the two countries signed security pacts with the UK. Moscow claims NATO's continuing its expansion to threaten Russia. The Finnish Foreign Minister, Pekka Haavisto, says membership would strengthen security.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine has altered the European and Finnish security environment. However, Finland is not facing an immediate military threat. Should Finland decide to apply, the accession of Finland would strengthen the security and stability of the Baltic Sea region and Northern Europe. Finland is a regional security provider and would further strengthen NATO as a future ally.
To Ukraine, the United Nations Human Rights Chief has said that over 1,000 civilian bodies have been recovered in the Kyiv region alone, and that the civilian death toll in Mariupol is in the thousands. That as there's been a massive explosion at the Azovstal steelworks in the besieged port city. Officials say Russia's pressing on with its assault on the plant. It's believed at least 100 civilians and wounded fighters are still sheltering there. MPs are warning Passport Office chaos is leaving people waiting on the phone for up to 9 hours. The Home Office is facing calls to say when the backlog of passport applications will be cleared. It's also being urged to compensate those that have had to wait for up to 10 weeks or more for theirs to be sorted. Responding to an urgent question in the House of Commons, the Home Office ministers insisted that the vast majority of applications are processed well within the time frame. A Labour MP has told GBNews she suffered sexual harassment whilst at Cambridge University. Stella Creasy said she was threatened with gang rape, but college authorities admonished her complaints instead of punishing the abusers. The university has apologised for what it's called a horrific ordeal, saying steps have since been taken to improve reporting incidents of abuse.
I was in a room with them all and they threatened to gang rape me. It took public humiliation and posters and finally other people coming forward and me collating the evidence of all the notes, the spitting in my room, the rubbish that was thrown at me, the sexual abuse and harassment if I tried to walk into the bar that came from this group of young men.
And you can watch the full exclusive interview with Gloria De Piero on the GB News website. Now, if you live on the Scilly Isles or in the Hebrides, you could soon be receiving your post by drone. The Royal Mail's creating 50 new postal drone routes for deliveries over the next 3 years, replacing land, sea and air services that could be affected by bad weather. The Shetland and Orkney Islands are also among the first routes, which are expected to be faster and more convenient for more remote communities. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though it's back to We Need to Talk About with Alex.
According to the UN, it's the world's happiest country with a population smaller than Scotland's and more saunas than cars. A magical snow-dusted land, home to the Moomins, a wife-carrying competition, and Nokia. It also happens to have an 800-mile border with Russia and neighbourly relations at times frostier than a Lapland winter. Finland's historic decision today to apply to join NATO, something the organisation has said would be welcomed with open arms, now means that Russia's borders with NATO could soon more than double, something bound to anger Vladimir Putin, who has warned that the expansion of NATO into Scandinavia would be met with fierce retaliation. Quite what vengeance the Russian leader plans remains unclear. But today, with the President and Prime Minister in Helsinki both backing entering the Western Peace Alliance, with a vote in the Finnish Parliament likely to pass the seminal move set to be announced on Sunday, the very thing Putin didn't want to happen could be about to come to pass. A historic moment whose consequences could redefine a continent. Well, Finland is one of few countries that keep a policy of national service, conscripting all adult males and encouraging women to also join the military or commit to civilian service for at least a year. So what do the younger generation make of the decision if tensions were now to escalate? Well, joining me is Johanna Puka, who is a member of the Finnish Women's Reserve Elite Forces, UTI. Johanna, fantastic to have you on the programme. Do you welcome the move by your President and Prime Minister today in saying that they want Finland to join NATO?
I personally do, and I think that's the kind of move we all waited for in order to take the next steps in this process.
Now, Finland is one of few countries that still has conscription in the form of national service. I believe you took part in that yourself, but surely that means there's a lot of young people who, if tensions were to escalate, could be dragged into something with Russia. What do you feel about that?
I think in general, the young population is actually more interested in joining the army now that the atmosphere in Europe and also in Finland has changed. When it comes to women, women have applied to the army more and more every year. And actually last year we had a record amount of people applying to the voluntary service. And we also have these voluntary defense training courses where you don't even have to be a military trained person. And those courses have been really full after the events in Ukraine started.
And in terms of the national service, what sort of thing does that involve? Is it compulsory, basically, for every young Finnish person to sign up?
Not every person. It's compulsory for men over 18. For women, it is voluntary. And if you voluntarily apply to the military, you have 45 days when you start the service to still evaluate if you want to complete the service. But after those 45 days, you're as compliant to finish the service as men over 18.
Now, you are also a district judge, a top legal eagle, as well as being in the Reserve Women's Elite Forces. How does that balance out in your day-to-day life?
Well, I'm only in the reserve, so basically it doesn't show in my everyday life all the time. I have more refresher exercises, but I think the Finnish military forces are increasing the amount of refreshers anyway in all branches of the forces.
Johanna, you're an amazing woman. It's been fantastic having you on the programme, and we do keep our fingers crossed that the application to NATO will succeed and you can join our club. Johanna Puka there, who is a member of the Reserve Finnish Women's Elite Forces and a district judge. What a woman. Well, how will Vladimir Putin react to this? Could it lead to an escalation in the conflict? Joining me now is Ewan Grant, a former intelligence analyst for ex-Soviet states. Ewan, we already know the Kremlin have said that they do regard this as a threatening action. NATO's border with Russia could well be twice the size now come next week. What do you think Putin might do? He has, of course, threatened retaliation, but we don't know in what form.
Yes, and of course it will largely be a threat because he's got his hands full on other things, hasn't he? He's got the famous or infamous cyber options. He knows that Finland has extensive cyber capabilities, but it also knows it has extensive capabilities to detect those. As you said, it's the home of Nokia. I think we can expect to see navigation, shipping and air disruptions in the Baltic Sea, and particularly around the Åland Islands, between Sweden and Finland. That's a long saga going back to the 19th century.
So we're talking about sort of more hybrid approaches here rather than a military approach. I mean, certainly when this was first discussed in Finland a couple of weeks ago, there was a Russian activity in Finnish airspace. What do you think the chances would be of Russia actually doing something before the membership to NATO actually comes to fruition, in terms of possibly boots on the ground or something that might take on a sort of far more sinister tone than a cyber attack?
I think that's unlikely, but I certainly think we can expect to see harassment by air and sea. Of course, as you know, Russia has the exclave of Kaliningrad, which, depending on how you study a map, is between Finland and the Western Baltic Sea. And certainly incursions into airspace, harassment of civil and military aviation. Boots on the ground, I think not, except possibly the odd accidental helicopter landing a kilometre or two inside the border.
And in terms of, are we now probably expecting Sweden to join it as NATO continues its eastward expansion, something that Vladimir Putin expressly did not want to happen? Could this push him to escalate his hostility against the West or even aggressions against Ukraine?
I don't think he'll escalate against Ukraine because I think he's got his hands tied there. I think he will start looking at long-term harassment in the north, but he's got a very poor hand now because Finland and Sweden punch above their weight, technically and in the quality of their personnel. This is a big gain for NATO, and consequently it's a big loss for Putin.
There are people out there who say that NATO expansion is a dangerous game, that it's rolling the dice. And as much as Vladimir Putin might be very preoccupied and not really being as successful as he might hope to in his war in Ukraine, that actually gambling with this sort of thing and potentially provoking Putin is unwise. What would you say to that?
Well, we've been here before. Some would say we let him get away with far too much for too long. I certainly saw that time after time with his Wagner mercenary proxy group in Africa. No, I think it's time to stand up because otherwise we'll be back on this in 5 years' time.
Ewan Grant, former intelligence analyst, ex-Soviet states, thank you so much for coming on the programme. Well, joining me in the studio is Conservative MP Michael Fabricant, and with me throughout the programme is Henry Hill, editor of Conservative Home, the independent right-wing blog. Michael, I'm going to come to you first. I mean, I'm sure you probably welcome the addition of Finland, or potential welcome of the potential addition of Finland to NATO. But the problem is, if things do escalate, and if there is some sort of attack on Finland, which would mean NATO would have to respond. Looking at the UK armed forces, they're about half the size that they were 30 years ago. Do you think it's time that we upped our defence spending?
Oh, well, I certainly think that. I think there are very few Conservative MPs who wouldn't say that. But, you know, let's just be clear that we actually spend more on defence than the Russians spend on defence. Of course, their buck goes further because the recruits are paid $25 a month. And, of course, you get paid a decent wage because it's a volunteer army here. Also, our equipment works. It's maintained. There isn't corruption. Whereas I know in the Russian army, and I have very, very strong contacts with Russia, in the Russian army, money is siphoned off, goes into generals' pockets, or as they would say, into their pension scheme. And we found that out, didn't we, in their invasion of the Ukraine? I mean, first of all, they thought it was only going to take 4 to 5 days. They had only 4 days of food supplies. They only had 5 to 7 days worth of equipment. I think most of the recruits didn't even know they were doing an invasion. 3 SNAT squads were sent in and were in place in Kyiv to try and capture Volodymyr Zelensky. 1 got within 5 minutes of him, but thank God failed. So what they thought was going to be a very quick action failed. By the way, you mentioned Finland, but Sweden too. Very neutral country. Sweden too is going to be joining NATO, and they'll be making their applications. Both have to be ratified, both in Helsinki and the Stockholm parliaments. But it's very exciting. And by the way, can I just say, sorry, I'm monopolising it. But, you know, for me, it's interesting because when I did as I always like to say, a real job before I became a member of Parliament, one of the things I did was set up radio and television stations. One of those radio stations was Moscow Echo, which was only closed about 3 weeks ago by Putin. It was the last Moskva Echo, there I'm showing off. Moskva Echo was the last independent radio station and independent voice in Russia. But the great thing is, although the vast majority of the population only get their news from the state broadcasters now, the people who are actually knowing what's going on, they've all got virtual private networks, which have not yet been blocked. They're getting the news. They do know what's going on. And I'm just going to give you a little insight. I was told that the original plan was that Putin was going to announce the mass mobilization of the Russian army at the recent May Day celebrations. He was dissuaded from doing so because they didn't want to provoke NATO. And also it was said, we haven't even got the equipment. So what's the point of mobilizing everybody if they can't even get to the Ukraine?
Now, Henry, talking about not having the equipment, the UK has sent a heck of a lot over to Ukraine, also sent a lot of aid, and there's a cost of living crisis going on at present as well. I mean, how does the government manage these priorities? Is it right that the UK is leading from the front? Yes, it's nice to have that cosy feeling of national pride and that sense of goodwill that it gives us, but there are people out there really struggling at the moment.
I don't think the military aid that we're sending to Ukraine makes an appreciable difference to the cost of living crisis. You know, for better or worse, the arms manufacture is one of the UK's primary export industries, and we're one of the world leaders in making very good weapons. So I think it makes sense that that's our contribution. The much more serious trade-off with the cost of living crisis, of course, is the sanctions regime, this extraordinary international regime of sanctions against Russia, which has thrown an absolute wrench into the world economy, done huge things to gas prices. That's going to be where the real trade-offs are, rather than military aid. I think with response to your first question, there are serious questions about how much the UK could meaningfully contribute on the ground to the defence of Eastern Europe. Our army is simply not geared towards that. We've got the sort of expeditionary force. We invest a lot in the Navy. There's all this idea of exercises east of Suez, the China Sea and everything else. We're not really ready to put a large militarily significant force on the ground in Finland. But I think what we could do is provide them with a lot of logistics and intelligence and, as you say, an awful lot of world-class weapons, put those in the hands of the Finns, and the Finns will probably get the job done.
Worth reminding, by the way, I mean, I agree with all of that, but worth reminding that the British have now a battle group in Estonia, and that's just across the Baltic from Finland.
It's about
very close by.
About 1,000 men, though, isn't it? I mean, if Russia goes in.
Yeah, but we've got the tanks there and all the rest of it.
It's a tripwire rather than a...
Well, it's like, it used to be like in the days of the Second World War, so you're grinning there, you're thinking, oh my God, let them quarrel it out. But you know what? In the Second World War, we had stop lines. Yeah. And they were very, very effective. And every single war game that's been played since between the British Army and the German Army said those stop lines would have worked. So actually, if you've got 1,000 men well equipped, it's a little bit like, you know, I said once to an admiral, we're getting 2 huge aircraft carriers. We haven't got the battle groups, the destroyers, to surround them because every American aircraft carrier is surrounded by about 6 or 8 destroyers. And he said, Mike, it's not like that anymore. The Navy is very, very modern. 2 destroyers does the job of 6 to 8 of the older American destroyers.
Chaps, going to have to leave it there for now. Michael, thank you so much for coming in the studio. Next time, I'm going to get you guys around one of those big sort of strategy maps on a table with bits and bobs and pieces and that device that you push them along and get people into position. Always fabulous having you here, Michael Fabricant. Thank you so much. And Henry will be catching up again in a bit. Yep. I really want to know your views. Should the government have commit a major boost to defence spending given everything going on? Email me, GBViews news at gbnews.uk or tweet the programme at GBNews. You're with GB News on TV and radio after the break. Will a cabinet meeting in Stoke-on-Trent convince Red Wall voters that the Conservative government has their backs? Time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. Dry, bright and a bit breezy sums up the weather for most today. It won't be completely dry. There will be some showers across western Scotland and Northern Ireland caused by this little weather feature which is slowly drifting in. For most places, though, it is going to be a fairly benign kind of weather day. Yes, there's a fair bit of cloud around, but some places seeing some decent spells of sunshine, parts of eastern England in particular, and at times across parts of northern England, some sunshine on the south coast as well. But generally a lot of cloud, but a lot of dry weather for England, Wales and eastern Scotland. But northwest Scotland's staying fairly soggy, and there'll be a few showers drifting into the west of Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland. A cooler feel here as well with a brisk breeze. Elsewhere, temperatures around average, high teens, maybe up to 20 in the sunshine across Essex and Kent. As we go through this evening, we'll see a bit more of that showery rain drifting south through southern Scotland into northern England, North Wales, maybe even a shower or two over Lincolnshire and the Midlands for a time. But that all scoots away by dawn, and again, most of us will start Friday dry. Quite a mild night, double digits in many towns and cities. On to Friday, and quite a lot of clouds. Certainly initially, the sunshine fairly hazy over England and Wales, but generally a fine day here. Dry and bright too for Northern Ireland with some sunshine. Again, it'll be northwestern parts of Scotland that see the rain, spreading more widely across the Northern Isles through the day. Quite soggy across the Highlands, but through the central belt, southern Scotland, most places dry. Plenty of afternoon sunshine across England and Wales, and a warmer day as well. Temperatures could get up to 23 across the eastern parts of England. There will be a bit more of a breeze blowing during Friday, but still very pleasant conditions through Friday evening. Still a few scattered showers across the northwest, but for most places, high pressure is moving in during Friday, and that will bring most of us a fine day on Saturday as well with some warm sunshine. There is the likelihood, though, of some thunderstorms coming up from the south on Saturday night and Sunday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, it's often said that Westminster operates inside a bubble, a cosy little London political club that is woefully out of touch with ordinary folk. As a cost of living crisis slams into Britain with energy bills, taxes and interest rates all going up, and number 10 becomes the most fined venue in the whole of the pandemic, well, you'd have good reason to say it's high time the powers that be left their London offices and stepped into the shoes of real Britons. And that's evidently what Boris Johnson is trying to demonstrate by dragging his ministers halfway up the country to Stoke-on-Trent to do cabinet-y things up there. I assume a bit of glad-handing and gurning for the camera before they file back onto their coach, half-chewed sandwiches and Dairy-Lee Dunkables in House of Commons lunchboxes as Rees-Mogg, clad in his high-vis jacket, clipboard in hand, takes the register to make sure nobody left Alok in the car park, while Boris is banned from sitting in the back, making spitballs to pelt at Rishi. Joking aside, will Boris's big away day really convince you that he's on your side? Or is it just a gimmick to distract from the fact that actually things haven't been this bad since the 70s? Well, let's speak now to Chris Curtis, Head of Political Polling at Opinion Research. Chris, where does the government stand with red wall voters after the local elections?
Well, it's not going particularly well. I don't think that's a fair point to say. I don't think it's an unfair point to say. The Conservatives have fallen behind in the national polls. They've fallen behind in many of those red wall areas as well, and there's a few reasons for that. The most important one is probably the cost of living crisis. Voters tell us that they're really struggling right now and that they don't think the government is doing enough to help them, and again, particularly in those red wall areas. But the second thing that's also quite important is obviously Partygate and the fact that that has, seriously damaged Boris Johnson's reputation. It's really had an impact on voters' views of him, and it means that they're less likely to trust him on all of those other big issues that he's trying to push through, whether that's levelling up or handling the cost of living crisis or dealing with immigration. So it's not looking particularly well with them. I think the big question is this just midterm blues? Is this what we normally see in the middle of the parliament when things go badly for the government in the middle, but they recover by the time of the next general election? Or is this indicative of something far more significant?
I mean, Boris, Rishi and indeed the Bank of England might well say that putting more pounds in people's pockets right now would only basically be putting fuel on the flames. If you're an economics wonk, you might understand all the machinations of that. I struggle to, I must admit. But is there anything that the government could do? What is it that voters need to be able to feel that sense of trust and connection with the government again?
I do think that they probably need to do something fairly bold on the cost of living crisis to help people. And I'm not an economist particularly either, so without not going to sort of use my A-level experience to try and talk about what impacts that might have. But I think voters basically, the most important thing voters want to see is help with their energy bills. That's where it's really hurting people, and it's really hurting those that are struggling the most, the hardest. So I think that's the place where they most want to see help. Is trying to sort of knock some money off the amount they're paying in energy bills each month.
Now, as a pollster and someone who understands or looks into public opinions, how much do gimmicks like this work? How much does that tend to move the needle? And would something like a windfall tax, because it would potentially make big headlines, even though it might not actually result in a huge change to the amount of money people have, would something like that be able to turn the voters, do you think? Or as long as people feel that pinch, is it going to stay the same?
I mean, I don't think gimmicks like sort of doing this away day really have much impact. Most people in the public in the country are paying attention to closely to what's happening day in, day out, and most of them won't have heard that Boris Johnson and the cabinet have gone to wherever they've gone to do whatever it is that they're doing. But I think that a big policy shift, particularly on the windfall tax, and not just a windfall tax, but what you use that money for, probably would have a far bigger impact. At the moment, the public don't think that the government is doing all that it can be doing in order to help them with the cost of living crisis. I think the government does need to do something big and bold in order to, convince them that they're doing all that they can. But also, I think the government needs to be a lot better at making the argument about why they can't do everything. If they believe that they can't go out and do more, they need to be going out and saying why they can't be doing more. And explaining to people, that they're really sorry, they'd love to be doing more and being more helpful. But unfortunately, circumstances mean that they can't. They're not going around and making that argument at the moment, which is probably the most important political argument at the moment. They're not really going around and making it because they're getting distracted and drawn off by lots of other issues or sort of cultural wars that many of them are wanting to fight.
Chris Curtis, my opinion, thank you ever so much. Well, let's go back to my studio guest for today, Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, the independent right-wing blog. Now, Henry, a big, bold move is what Chris Curtis says when it comes to public opinion. They need to do something a bit more headliney that people actually believe will have an impact. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's precisely it. The problem with trips like this is they work as set dressing if you have a big announcement. Say they got an emergency package of measures and Boris Johnson had gone up to Stoke and he'd been able to say, look, I'm here in the Red Wall talking to voters and we're doing this. That's fine. That can work. It's good PR. But the thing is, they seem to have gone all the way up there with nothing to announce. They're just sort of there listening. It's a little bit like that sort of thick of it sketch. They're here to hear, as it were. They're sort of just showing that they've not forgotten that the Red Wall exists. Now, that's not going to cut any ice eventually. You know, we have at least 18 months probably until the next election. Families are going to come under increasing pressure on the cost of living, and they're going to be asking, what is the government doing? Now, there are reasons the government can't do everything, but as Chris said, but the problem is that Boris Johnson is a natural booster. He's an optimist. He doesn't like telling people things they don't want to hear. It's one of his biggest strengths when things are going well. But it also means that he now can't go to voters and say, look, I can't give you an upbeat speech. This is a really tough set of economic circumstances and we're in tough conditions, which means I think the government might end up in quite a toxic place where Boris is giving a lot of upbeat talk and not matching it with any action because he can't persuade Rishi Sunak to turn the taps on. What we really need from the government is something like an emergency budget, not a trip to Stoke-on-Trent.
Henry, thank you ever so much. What do you think? Emergency budget, is that what you'd like to see happening? A windfall tax on the big energy companies? Or are you a bit cognisant, actually, that the way things are, it's not the government's fault. Most of the world's in the same circumstances, and perhaps rash action could make things worse? Let me know. You're with GB News on TV and DAB Radio after the break. 4 days of celebration are underway ahead of our marvellous Queen's Jubilee. We'll have the latest live. But first, let's check on the news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Downing Street has confirmed that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet Secretary haven't been hit with the latest round of Partygate fines. The Met Police has issued more than 50 additional fines over parties held in Downing Street and other government buildings during lockdown. The Prime Minister says a strong jobs-led recovery is the single most important thing the UK needs to focus on. Boris Johnson's chairing a cabinet meeting in Stoke-on-Trent today. He says the Queen's speech should enable legislative power to tackle what's driving up cost of living prices, in particular energy. Russia's foreign ministry is warning it'll be forced to take retaliatory military steps if Finland joins NATO. The Finnish Prime Minister and President announced today the nation must apply for membership without delay after decades of neutrality. Sweden's also likely to follow suit. To Ukraine, the United Nations Human Rights Chief has said over 1,000 civilian bodies have been recovered in the Kyiv region alone, and that the civilian death toll in Mariupol is in the thousands. Earlier, there was another large explosion at the Azovstal steelworks in the besieged port city. And shadow MPs are warning passport office chaos is leaving people waiting on the phone for up to 9 hours. The Home Office is being urged to reveal when the backlog of passport applications will be cleared and to compensate those that have had to wait for up to 10 weeks or more for theirs to be sorted. The Home Office minister is insisting the vast majority of applications are processed well within the time frame. TV Online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. It's back to Alex and we need to talk about in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
More than 46,000 Ukrainian refugees under the government's visa scheme. That's according to figures published today. This includes almost 20,000 under the family scheme and 26,600 people under the Homes for Ukraine sponsorship scheme. But the applications for refugees far outnumber those who have made it to Britain, while the UK is undoubtedly leading the way when it comes to the supply of arms and aid to the nation. Our humanitarian effort has been heavily criticised. But what's the perspective on Britain from Ukraine? Let's talk now to Denis Ganja, who's the Ukrainian youth delegate to the UN. Denis, thank you so much for coming on the programme. I've heard reports that Brits, I've got a friend over there reporting, who gets a resounding reception everywhere he goes, and a lot of positivity about the UK when it comes to giving arms and aid to Ukraine. But what do you think most Ukrainians feel, especially when it comes to families who are supposed to be coming to the UK and haven't yet been able to make it here?
You know, first of all, of course, we are more than thankful to your nation and what you're doing for us, because I've been talking a lot to the common Brits who are just, writing to me, Denis, how can they help? And of course, one of the best ways is to sponsor a Ukrainian refugee family just in your place. What I know and what I hear from my friends, fortunately, they reached to Britain. They are still planning to go there. But, the case is that people don't really want to come to your countries for a long stay, because the moment the peace is imposed in our country, they will come back home. This is for sure.
And in terms of the situation at the moment, I see you're in Kiev. I mean, are you feeling quite comfortable there? Are tensions rising? Are people starting maybe to file back into the capital?
If you come to Kiev today, you will notice that it's something the same what has been before the war, because coffee shops are working, restaurants are working, you can go to the shopping mall, buy something. Ukrainians, we love freedom so much, we love our lives so much that we want to feel this. Even, Kharkiv, which is still, the region where the Russians are. There are a lot of cities which are under occupation in the region. People are coming back to Kharkiv very fast. Because, even we lost our homes, we want to be where we are to rebuild our country and to make sure that we are strong and ready for everything.
At the start of the war, we had shocking images of caravans of people, children sometimes, completely by themselves, lonkeys of people, largely made up of women, trying to get out of the country, crossing the Polish border, trying to get anywhere to safety. Has that sort of exodus of people started to subside now?
What we are hearing is more than 800,000 people getting back home to Ukraine. Of course, it's nothing compared to more than 7 million which have fled Ukraine. But we are still, we are already thinking here in the Ukrainian government how we bring people back home, how we build, the new homes for them, how we create the new business opportunities, especially in the Western regions, which are, are rather peaceful regions right now. This is what we are working on a daily basis here. And, what is really important, the Ukrainian president has already started the National Council on the Rebuilding of Ukraine. The country in the war, thinking on how we will live in the peaceful times already. This is great, and I can even I am shocked about my nation.
Yeah, I get the sense, actually, there's a real sense of optimism coming from what you're saying. Do you personally and do people in Ukraine think that there could be light at the end of the tunnel, and perhaps moves like Finland saying that they want to join NATO and seeing all the support that the West has given to Ukraine, giving you that resilience to hold Russian forces at bay? Do you think that there is a future now, that you're beginning to see optimistically that at some point this will come to an end?
Of course, it will come to an end. Of course, we will win this war. Of course, we will bring our territories back. The only case we carry in Ukraine right here a lot is, of course, the defenders of Mariupol who are still, besieged in the Azovstal plant. These are the only people we are praying for them daily, and we are trying to reach to the world to say that we need to save them. But still, I do hope that, in the coming months, you will surely see the new brave country which has shown its responsibility for, protecting not only ourselves, but the whole Europe. And of course, we will win Russia together with your help, because of the weapons you give us, the support you give us, by accepting us, but even right now, by giving the chance for me to talk to you. This is all important, and this will surely come to the one end, and it will be the good one.
Denis, I think that the world's fallen in love with Ukraine a little bit. Thank you so much for coming on the programme today. That's Denis Ganja, the Ukrainian youth delegate to the UN. Well, let's go back to my studio guest for today, Henry Hill. Now, the government has been criticised over its humanitarian effort, praised in other ways. What's your take on that?
I think, obviously, I second to no one in my criticism of the Home Office. It's a very problematic department. But I do think that sometimes the analysis of the way the government's gone about this and the nature of the crisis can be a little bit off. Because unlike a lot of other refugee crises we have, for example, from Libya, the Middle East and so on, which is large movements of people who are looking to come to the United Kingdom basically as their endpoint in order to build a life here, in Ukraine, as Denis said, the goal is to go back to Ukraine as quickly as possible. Many of them are already going back. They don't want to become part of the settled population of another country. And so therefore, when we say, for example, that countries in Eastern Europe have taken more refugees than Great Britain, that makes sense. They're closer. It allows people to go back. I think that we should assess Britain's contribution to the refugee crisis not only by how many people we take, but by how much material support we provide to other countries, particularly Ukraine's neighbours, to look after the refugees there, make sure they're safe.
Henry, thank you. Well, as the nation gears up for the long bank holiday weekend next month to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, events to mark the historic reign of our beloved monarch are already underway. 4 days of celebrations kick off today at the Royal Windsor Horse Show, home to the Queen and where she currently resides at the castle. Rosie Wright is there for us. Rosie, what have you been seeing? What's going on the ground?
A very good afternoon to you, Alex. It's been a fantastic day so far, day one. There is this real celebratory atmosphere. We are in the private grounds of Windsor Castle, only allowed open once a year for this show, and we are coming towards the middle of the afternoon of day one. It's a moment to mark what will be the start of a huge range of celebrations for the Queen. I'd like to introduce to you Joe, if I can. He is a Team GB international show jumper. Just tell us what's going on here behind us. Everyone's going into the main arena.
Yeah, main arena here behind us. This is a 140 national class.
What does that mean, 140 national class?
So the 140 is the height, so it's 1 metre 40 high. It's got a selection of jumps and fences in there arranged to challenge the horse and rider on their control and their ability to adjust to that arena.
And you've been jumping already this morning, and part of what's going on today is it's not just about the kind of performances later on, but of course the competitions, which is what you're here for. You were telling me about something, a competition that you won last year, and excuse my absolute naivety when it comes to horse jumping. Jumping how high? Over 2 metres?
Yes, 2 metres 5 we jumped last year. It's a class called the Puissance, and Puissance is a translation for, I think it's for power and agility, maybe, or something.
And it's a solid brick wall that you're going over.
Well, actually, now it used to be, you know, back in the day it would have been a proper brick wall. Now, obviously, due to the safety measures, it's a little bit safer than just being a brick wall, but it's essentially a high jump competition for the horses.
So for you, what's it like representing Team GB, gearing up for the Olympics in Paris? You're only 22, it's quite a lot of pressure.
Yes, well, you know, I've got a fabulous set of horses for me to ride at the minute. And I have one in particular I think has got the ability to go all the way to that top level, so that's certainly my goal.
Of course, horse riding, jumping is so deeply associated with the royal family and the Queen. She's got 41 horses and ponies who are going to be competing over the next few days. For you, it's a really British thing to do. If you're looking at it from the outside, though, it can feel a bit like, oh, I don't even know how I get involved. It seems like a bit of a closed shop. Is it?
I don't think it is in the end. I think when you look at the sort of opportunity there is in our sport, it's grown a lot over the last few years. And you know, when you look at the fact we've got men and women competing against each other, this week, like I say, I'm 22, and we've got riders here of 60 plus in the same international competitions. So when you look at it from that point of view, we have a huge wide range of people that are involved. But I think now there's becoming more and more programs to set up that opportunity for people to be involved with horses, because they're wonderful animals once you get to know them.
I know I was a little bit scared of them earlier, but I've been very much introduced today. Joe, thank you very much. There is one big thing sort of overhanging the celebrations today and leading up to Sunday with these celebrations is which members of the royal family will make it to the show, and particularly will the Queen make an appearance. There was some hope earlier this morning that she might have made an appearance today. Rumours abound that she might come tomorrow. Of course, this has been a difficult week for the Queen. She was supposed to be there, but for the first time in nearly 60 years, she missed the state opening of Parliament. Doctors said that she had some mobility issues. Well, this will be a much shorter commute. She's currently residing in Windsor Castle, and we're in the grounds. So we'll have to watch and wait and see if she makes a public appearance here at a place she loves. She hasn't missed a show yet, so we'll have to see for the rest of the week if she makes an appearance.
Rosie, thank you ever so much. Can't believe you're scared of horses. They're wonderful. Go on, get on one for your next live. Well, you've been sending me your emails throughout the show today. Bob says, given the recent invasion of Ukraine, it is clear that all the defence cuts since options for change in the 1990s have been a mistake. We do therefore need to increase defence spending in order to ensure the security of our island. Ken says, I think the UK should now bring back national service. Not only would it offer protection for the UK, but it would give skills and burn up the energy of young people. It will also give order and teach people how to take orders. I think it has a lot of benefits which are needed in the new world. Do you know, I couldn't agree more. Well, yesterday, I was exposed to the letters section of the Solomon Times, the local rag of the archipelago of 900 islands in the middle of the Pacific, with only 600,000 odd inhabitants. And I was delighted by the various honorifics its readers chose to deploy in their missives to one another. How delightful, I thought. If only we took the time to also address one another with such joy and warmth. So in the style of the good readers of this proud Commonwealth nation's principal paper, to my dear democratic brothers and sisters of the British Isles, my fellow lovers of liberty, to the beautiful people of Blighty, it is time for the Alex Agenda. Well, if you're anything like me, coming face to face with the postman is as rare as an audience with the Queen. I seem to collect those while you were out forms like a 90s teenager stashed Panini football stickers. But there's a warming thought that there's a human out there who might start to wonder whether my rotting corpse is being eaten by my cat. Well, that could soon be no more. The Royal Mail has announced it plans to replace your local postie with a fleet of dystopian drones littering the skies with creepy little robots clutching that thing from Amazon that you really don't need. They'll be tearing down telephone wires, getting stuck in trees and accidentally buzzing through your bathroom window to clatter, twitching like a robot roadkill in the gutter, while a crime wave of looters with giant butterfly nets will snatch your parcels from the stratosphere. Please make it stop. And having brought you some strange phantasmagoric dancing ritual from the European Parliament yesterday, here's another example of critical lawmaking straight from the heart of Europe's nexus of power. One only assumes someone told this lad that Liz Truss has threatened to scrap the Northern Irish Protocol, or perhaps that Nigel Farage is on a Eurostar bound for Brussels. Either way, good to see them having such a jolly old time without us. Now, of all the things to face severe shortages due to China closing basically all of its factories because of pretty zealous approaches to zero COVID, it's the hen party favourite, the funny phallus, that is currently in peril. Apparently, supplies of plastic members have seriously drooped, with some party shop owners only just receiving shipments of the products from orders placed last autumn. If there's one thing I vow to never have, it's a hen party. I can't think of anything worse than dressing like a slutty version of Dame Edna while being forced to consume alcohol through a genital-shaped straw. Well, Let's get the thoughts of my studio guest for today, Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Have you got anything that you want to add to that?
I mean, I don't think I can really venture much on hen parties, although dressing up as a slutty version of Dame Edna is typically what the groom seems to do on most of the stag do's that I go on these days. I think the drone story is quite interesting. I know that you don't sound like you're a fan, but I think when you live in London, it's very easy to take for granted how easy it is to get everything delivered, when in a lot of those Scottish Island communities, they're dependent on ferries, which the SNP have been mismanaging into the ground. The ships are, often delayed. Some of them aren't even built. And so this could potentially be great news for those communities in that I think drones are still affected by the weather, so I'm not entirely sure of the business plan. But if it does mean that people living on those islands can get essential supplies much more easily, that's a good thing. What I'm disappointed about is the fact that this technology hasn't reached London yet. Years ago, Amazon put out a blueprint for drone delivery in London, and at the centrepiece there was this great sort of Zeppelin thing, a sort of aerial warehouse where they were going to fly over London and the drones would come down to your house. And it looked like the future, what the future was meant to look like when I was 5. And yet the Scottish Islands have got it before us. London's supposed to get everything first. I feel a little bit shortchanged.
Wasn't there a time that some sort of little robot, Amazon robot that goes up and down streets is being tested in Milton Keynes or something?
And those are still being used in some areas. Yeah. And those, especially in American cities, those delivery drones are getting increasingly common. I think the problem is that they're very easy to vandalise and sort of kick and steal. So you need to have sort of a quite nice high trust suburban neighbourhood in order to pull them off. But yeah, in some places those really are the future.
Now, I played a clip there of someone just caterwauling at the European Parliament with a load of people in masks studiously clapping. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. I haven't spent time in that ridiculous building. But I made the point that perhaps, he'd heard about dropping the Northern Irish Protocol. Briefly, do you think... Oh, there he is.
Oh, God, there he is.
Don't mind him. Look at him. Poor man. He's going to blow an artery in a minute.
Uh-huh.
But do you think it is time that the UK government just said, that's it, enough's enough, we're not playing a game, we're getting rid of the protocol?
I think it's certainly the case that the government should not necessarily scrap it all in one go, but give itself the power to scrap it, which is what my sources suggest the legislation being considered is doing. It's not going to simply, we'll pass the law, the protocol's gone, but it's, we're going to pass the law, and that means that Liz Truss, or the Secretary of State, can, on her own bat, set aside different provisions in order to try and make it work better. Now, that is long overdue. The EU has clearly signalled that it's not going to budge. We've given them 2 years. We've sort of bent over backwards in many ways to try and give them the time to move. If they're not going to move, the protocol does have to change.
Yeah, I always thought we needed a better PR campaign against the Northern Irish Protocol. I get the impression loads of people out there, including Joe Biden, don't seem to really get it.
Oh, the British PR on everything to do with Northern Ireland has been absolutely abysmal. And this goes right back to the beginning, when Theresa May was basically gold. You read about the baffled delight of the Irish and European negotiators when Theresa May and her sort of slightly clueless team were sort of convinced themselves that, oh no, the Belfast Agreement means we have to have an invisible border with the Republic of Ireland. It's complete nonsense. The EU was astonished that we came to believe that, but that's what saved the seas for everything that followed. And I think it's past time that the government actually said, no, the Belfast Agreement isn't just a sort of Irish nationalist charter. It doesn't mandate better relations with the Republic of Ireland than with the mainland. It made explicit provisions to unionists that it would protect Northern Ireland's constitutional status. It doesn't currently do that. It has to change.
Henry, it's been fantastic having you on the programme today, and please do join us again. Henry Hill from Conservative Home. That's about it for now. Join me again for We Need to Talk About on GBNews at the same time, 2 o'clock tomorrow. Coming up next, it's The Briefing with Darren McCaffrey, but first, it's time for the weather forecast.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. Dry, bright and a bit breezy sums up the weather for most today. It won't be completely dry. There will be some showers across Western Scotland and Northern Ireland caused by this little weather feature which is slowly drifting in. For most places, though, it is going to be a fairly benign kind of weather day. Yes, there's a fair bit of cloud around, but some places seeing some decent spells of sunshine, parts of eastern England in particular, and at times across parts of northern England, some sunshine on the south coast as well. But generally a lot of cloud, but